Steven, it has been so long since we had an episode, but welcome back. It feels good to be back on recording in everyone's AirPods, earphones, headphones, whatever the heck you're listening on. Maybe an old stereo or just in your car speakers. Whatever it is, we're glad to be back there. And yeah, today we have a spicy double episode because I had a crazy weekend and had no Wi Fi and was traveling all over the place here in South Africa. And so we are doing the first two episodes of Loki in one giant episode right now. Um, Dang. I don't even know what to say about this show. This thing is off to the craziest start, even compared to WandaVision. Like, of the three Disney Plus shows that are out so far, obviously Loki's not fully out, but out of what we have so far, man, this is the most mind bending. Oh, I don't even know all of my thoughts. Like, they're not all fully gathered, um, on the first couple episodes that we have so far. So hopefully going through this will be helpful for me as well. And if any of you listening have had the similar experience to me, hopefully this is a bit cathartic and can give you some solidarity knowing that nobody knows really what the heck is going on in this show. um, and yeah, Steve, what have you thought so far of episodes 1 and 2 of Loki?
Yeah, let's just cut the fluff here and get right into it. This show has been great through the first two episodes. I'm fully expecting the quality to continue, and considering the quality of each of the first three shows up until this point, it seems like uh, our observations that we made about the earlier series, how they had a cinematic feel, even though they were shorter episodes instead of full length movies. It seems like that's going to continue. Loki so far has seemed very much like a Marvel movie ripped straight from the big screen, and it's a good sign that their TV shows, despite I'm sure being smaller budget than a big motion picture, still carry that quality and make you feel like you're watching a big screen. Agents of Shield is one of those shows that Marvel put out prior to official MCU canon. It is connected, but later on it gets a little bit separate from the main timeline, and they're kind of doing their own thing. So it definitely feels like a TV show when you're watching that. But watching Loki the last couple of weeks, I just feel like I'm only getting parts of the whole movie that I want to see. And on top of that, combined with a few other reasons that we'll get into here as we go through the episode, I'm dying week to week waiting for the next episode of this show. There's so much going on, and clearly from the first two episodes, I think we can tell, even if Kevin Feige hadn't already come out and said it explicitly, but Loki is going to have the biggest impact of any of the first three shows on the MCU as a whole moving forward. Now, this is great for me personally because I was one of the people that was not disappointed, that's not the right word, but I wanted more from WandaVision in terms of the impact that it would have. I thought Wanda being, officially coming into her own as a Scarlet Witch and realizing basically the first step of her near infinite power, that would open a lot more doors. And in the end, it turned out to, I don't want to say it just became a show about Wanda and Vision and dealing with grief. Because that's what it was from the start, and my own expectations shouldn't take away from what was a very good show start to finish. But Loki is now kind of that doorbuster show that I expected from WandaVision. And let's just get right into the first episode as we explore the ways that this is going to impact everything we know in crazy ways.
I guess we don't technically know that yet. They could pull another fast one on us, but all signs are pointing to that being the case. So just hoping they don't lift us up to drop our hopes and dreams again.
Exactly. So let's just get right into the episode here. The first scene of episode 1 is a reshoot of that scene from Endgame, and I guess part of a scene from the original Avengers where Loki is captured. or defeated by the Avengers, and they all have that team shot where they're huddled around him, like intimidating him as he basically surrenders. And we get that scene from Endgame where Hulk knocks the Tesseract out of future Tony Stark's hands. Loki grabs it and then is teleported somewhere. We find out in the first scene that he gets teleported to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. Lands
it's the middle of absolute nowhere.
in the complete middle of nowhere, like in just a pile of sand, and apparently is like right next to some, random civilians. And the funny thing is, he immediately starts. He jumps up on a rock to put himself above the people, and immediately launches into a huge soliloquy about how he is burdened with glorious purpose, and it is his destiny to rule lesser beings. But while he's mid monologue, a kind of space door opens up in front of him, and we are introduced to the TVA and their Minutemen. The Time Variance Authority is kind of the, I don't want to say antagonist of this show, because it doesn't really seem like that at this point, that they're evil may not even be the right word, but I guess opposing force. As we get into later episodes, or later in this episode and episode 2, we can talk about the antagonists that they're setting up. But the TVA, Time Variance Authority, is basically this entity that exists outside of the main timeline, and I guess outside of time itself. And their responsibility is to kind of prune loose branches. They see the timeline that everything has occurred in up to this point, as we'll get into a little bit more here as well. I feel like I'm kind of getting ahead of myself explaining the TVA as they're introduced, but they give some exposition later that Loki hears, and we can just skip past that to reveal it now. So basically, the timeline is kind of like, a tree branch, and when certain things happen that aren't supposed to, according to the people who keep this timeline, or the beings, I should say. We don't know if they're people or not. But there's 3 timekeepers that control this sacred timeline upon which all of the events up in the MCU up till now have taken place. And the TVA's job is kind of to keep that main timeline in check. If something happens, for example, Loki with a Tesseract escaping, we know that doesn't happen in the original timeline, because he's taken back to Asgard as a prisoner following Avengers, and then is there for the entirety of Dark World, and then dies in the beginning of Infinity War, and has adventures during Ragnarok in the middle of that. So we know that that's what happens to real timeline Loki, and then this alternate timeline, or I guess past Loki, kind of takes the Tesseract, which he's not supposed to do, and escapes. Basically, this creates a nexus event, as they describe it, which creates kind of a break in the timeline. And the TVA's job is to kind of go in and clean that up. So if something happens that creates one of these branches, they have to go in and kind of prune, as they say. They'll reset that timeline, which essentially entails just destroying everything that came of that not supposed to happen decision, and restoring order to the main timeline. Seems kind of like time police is their job, maybe like a time SWAT team they kind of look like. There's a lot that we find out about them, but there's also a lot that is left unanswered after these first 2 episodes. But this is where we get introduced to them, as they kind of bring Loki in. Their space door brings them back to TVA headquarters. Who knows where? I guess really, who knows when either. We don't know exactly when this is supposed to be happening, as it exists outside of time. So technically, Loki could be happening during Infinity War and Endgame, and everything that's transpired during the MCU so far. But we won't really know until the series concludes and the full impact of its events unfolds upon the MCU, or is at least, revealed to us. So this is where we get introduced to the TVA. They take Loki prisoner after slapping him in the face in 1/16th speed. but he feels the pain in real time. Uh, Pretty humorous scene where he's getting slapped in slow motion and is just looks very goofy as his face reverberates from the impact. But uh, they put a little time collar on him and take him to time jail, basically. Justin, I want to know what your thoughts were as we got introduced to the TVA here. Having not seen any of the trailers, what were your thoughts as they just appeared out of nowhere and took Loki prisoner?
Well, I'll be honest. I hadn't seen any of the trailers, but I had heard, unfortunately, that there was going to be some type of authority like that. I had a general idea that Loki was going to interact with this time force type of thing. I don't remember where exactly I saw it, but one of the unavoidable see it on social media somewhere type of deals. But I still had no clue what it was going to be or how he was going to play a role in it. I didn't know if he would like seek them out or what. So the introduction to them was kind of out of nowhere, but I'm sure for anyone that looked up beforehand or saw the trailers, it was not that much of a surprise. I mean, clearly something was going to happen. He wasn't just going to stay in Mongolia, and build a farm or whatever. So clearly there was something that was going to happen that was going to yank him out of there. And yeah, the TVA has been interesting. There's a couple things about it that are a little bit raise some questions, we'll say, and a couple things that I still am figuring out if I enjoy or not about them. But overall, they just seem so bizarre. I don't know. That's just the word I have to explain it, because just the idea that there's this agency keeping all of time basically functioning as it should just doesn't really, I don't know. That seems like it makes so much of the MCU just seem so insignificant. Yeah, obviously it's not insignificant for the people that are experiencing it because they don't know. Um, but still, like, the fact that everything is predetermined, and if something happens that isn't supposed to happen, then they just go back and change it so that thing never happened. Then there's no, I don't know, everyone just does what they're supposed to just because they're supposed to. And obviously you don't know that as you're experiencing it. But still, it's just like, a little bit interesting as a concept. And Loki, claims to be able to be outside of that a little bit, and he thinks very highly of himself, so he has some clashes with them right at the beginning. And I mean, he's Loki, he clashes with everybody. He definitely enjoys it. So yeah, I'm interested to see where the TVA goes. I think anybody that's watched these first two episodes thinks and recognizes that there's something that we're not quite getting as part of the whole picture with the TVA. And so I think that will just get revealed more as we go. So I think judging it too soon is kind of just something we can't even do. I think we'll have to look back at the end more so than now to have an idea. And for me personally, to have a strong opinion one way or another on the TVA. But it's just a really cool concept for a show in general. This idea of fixing time travel mistakes, basically, and Loki being along for the ride. Starting off as less an active participant and more just getting dragged along. But I'm sure as it goes on and on, we see that more in episode 2, and then as it goes on and on, I'm sure he'll be much more active as a participant in what's going on. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely the first time that anything like this has been in the MCU, and the fact that they can just teleport anywhere in time super easy, it seems, with their tech, is like Endgame made such a big deal of them figuring out how to do time travel, and then now it's like, oh, all of these people can just do it whenever they want with no no challenges, no special suits or anything. Um, so that makes it a little bit funny. Now that the door is open, it's just wide open, and time travel is going to be here to stay in the MCU, which is good and bad, I suppose.
Yeah, opening that can of worms in Endgame where, Tony Stark basically solves time travel with minimal effort. Um, that always is going to raise a question when you introduce something like that into your story. Like, if time travel is a thing now, why are there any problems? Why can't we just go back and, fix those problems? And the TVA has kind of answered why there, are problems or have been conflicts in the past, because those were quote unquote supposed to happen, which, raises the whole question of predestination versus free will, which Loki and one of the TVA agents, Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, who I must say is killing it this season so far, was not expecting incredible acting chops out of the WoW guy, but I mean he's killing it. Marvel always does their casting well, and despite getting some big name actors over the years, some actors have become big names through being in Marvel films like Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, but Owen Wilson, Angelina Jolie, Robert Downey Jr., Samuel L. Jackson. Obviously, there are countless big names that they take on, and the impressive thing is how these big names, despite being very recognizable actors and actresses, don't really seem to be doing themselves in their roles. They settle into the role of whatever MCU character they're playing, and I really see them as that character instead of just, oh, it's Owen Wilson in the MCU. Obviously, he's still recognizable, but he's doing such a good job acting that he's selling me on the role of Mobius. But yes, going back to what I had just started to say before I went off on my Owen Wilson tangent, there's always going to be questions raised when you introduce time travel as to why there be any conflicts. And basically, it seems like the TVA has been saying that everything that's happened up to this point was supposed to happen. Now, supposed to happen according to whom? Allegedly, the timekeepers are the ones keeping everything in order and defining what should and shouldn't happen. But why do they get to say, what should or shouldn't happen? I think there's a lot more to learn about the timekeepers that we haven't even got to yet. But once he gets captured, Loki's taken to this kind of, it looked like a DMV waiting room with a big, long line made up of, those little conveyor ropes and just pointlessly winding back and forth in a massive empty room. And that's where he gets the kind of exposition dump from, like a kind of PSA on one of the screens there. They give some information about the sacred timeline and the timekeepers and Nexus events, as I've already just discussed here. But Loki doesn't really believe any of that at first. He still is a very arrogant individual. Remember, this is the Loki that essentially is fresh off of Avengers. Literally, minutes before getting slapped in 1/16 speed, he was getting ragdolled by Hulk around the top of Avengers Tower. So this is not the same Loki that we know from Dark World and Ragnarok and Infinity War. He hasn't had those movies worth of character development to go through and, become that self-sacrificial character that we see in the opening parts of Infinity War. So this Loki is very much still disillusioned with his own power, shall we say high on his own farts, really can't get enough of himself and doesn't believe that there could be an entity out here that could control him like that or that controls all of reality and time to this degree. But basically, he gets that, little speech that is then brought to a trial where you basically have no hope of being found not guilty. But if you are found guilty, then you are reset and I guess sent back to your original timeline, is the way that the TVA puts it. But being reset to our eyes has seemed just basically being disintegrated from existence.
Yeah, it's like the melty stick that the Grandmaster had.
Exactly. Oh, he interrupted. That's not a capital violation. Don't hand me the melt stick. Love Jeff Goldblum. But basically, Loki's whole pitch is like, listen, I could, he reveals that he knew that it was the Avengers time traveling. He says, oh, you could smell the scent of two Tony Starks cologne, which is a funny detail. But basically, he's like, look, you should be arresting the Avengers, not me. Like, clearly they went back in time to stop me from achieving my goal of becoming God King. Like, they are the ones that mess up the timeline, and they should be the ones you are arresting. And the judge is basically like, that was supposed to happen. You picking up the Tesseract wasn't. Which, to me, is like, I don't know how that's fair, from Loki's perspective. Like, he was just there, and the Tesseract landed at his feet. What was he supposed to do? Like, put it back in the box and let himself get arrested? Like, if anything, that's a result of the Avengers messing with time that he escaped. So, is Hulk knocking the Tesseract all the way to his feet supposed to happen, but him not picking it up is not? There's a lot of questions that are raised about what's supposed to happen, and that's kind of Loki's point. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, look at it. He's like, right, yeah. Oh, the timekeepers said it was allowed to happen. Okay. He's like, well, if I could speak to these quote-unquote timekeepers, I'm sure we could hash this all out. This is just a big misunderstanding.
Yeah, that really doesn't make sense. Like, when you say it that way, right? Like, everything that the Avengers did, going back in time, getting the briefcase, going, Tony Stark being able to carry it to that exact point, and then the Hulk having to go down the stairs and then hit him and knock it out. Like, all of that is supposed to happen, and none of that's fixed. And then Loki, his entire life and everything that has made him into the person that he is, with the personality, and the thought processes and whatever, everything that's happened to him in his whole life leading up to that moment was also supposed to happen, making him the exact type of person in that moment who would grab it and leave. That was all supposed to happen, and it was supposed to get knocked right to his feet. And yet, even with all those factors very clearly leading to him grabbing it and going, that final part was the one thing that was not supposed to happen in that scenario. Like, that just doesn't make any sense at all. Like, not at all.
Yeah, doesn't compute. And I'm sure Loki is feeling the same exact way. He's like, this is total BS. These are some trumped up charges that you're hitting me with here. But as he's about to be reset, Mobius kind of skirts in. We saw a scene of him earlier, actually, where he is investigating an incident in, I think the 1800s in some castle.
Or some church or something.
Yeah, oh, you're right. Sorry, some church that had big stained glass windows. Mobius, at this point in the story, is investigating the deaths of a bunch of Minutemen squads that have been sent out to reset, as they're called, variants. So basically the main version of yourself is, that's you, but there are variant versions of yourself that exist on other timelines or other branches of time, and that could be any version of you. But these variants are not the main one, and they have to be reset if they deviate from the path. So Mobius is tracking one of these, or is trying to figure out what happened to one of these teams that went to go reset a variant, but ended up all dying. And he makes contact with a child there, and basically asks the child, he's like, yo, who did this? And the child points to a stained glass window of the devil with big horns, which some people, I think, immediately assume Mephisto after the whole WandaVision season, and seemed like it was leading up to a big villain like that. But my guess,
did that on purpose.
They for sure did that on purpose. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he was there in some capacity behind the scenes. But
Disney is trolling, and that's annoying.
They love to do that. But basically, it seems like the real reason is because Loki at that point was wearing his gaudy uniform or suit or whatever, and had the big helmet with the big bendy horns. And so the kid must have mistaken him for the devil.
Or maybe the kid was just terrified and, didn't know
Hey,
what he
it's
was
possible,
seeing.
but so far it seems like he was pointing to somebody like Loki. And Mobius confirms this later in the episode as well, but we'll get to that. He also finds on the kid, or the kid gives it to him actually, a pack of gum, which clearly was not around in the 1800s. And it's just a hint towards where, the person that they're looking for, basically. But at the end of Loki's trial, Mobius comes in and kind of rescues him from being reset. He's like, look, I kind of need to question this guy. He could be useful to me in my investigation. Let me see what I can get out of him before, you have to reset him. And the judge is like, okay, fine. So Mobius takes Loki to kind of this time theater room in the TVA. And Loki still doesn't believe what's happening to him at this point. He calls the TVA let me see if I can find the exact quote. He says, it's a cruel and elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear. And he basically just sees the whole TVA as like an illusion to entrap or inspire fear in weaker individuals. But this is where his perception starts to change. Mobius starts playing Loki's life on a reel, or kind of his greatest hits, as he puts it, on a reel of film in this theater. And we get a hilarious scene where it's revealed that Loki is actually D.B. Cooper, the mysterious man who stole $200,000 after hijacking a plane on the West Coast and then disappeared and was never heard from again or found. Apparently Loki had lost a bet to Thor and had to be D.B. Cooper. And then as he jumped out of the plane was bifrosted back to Asgard. So that's why they never were able to find him, which I thought was a hilarious scene.
I always thought Charles Westmoreland from Prison Break was D.B. Cooper.
I was thinking the same exact thing, dude. There's two D.B. Coopers out there.
Oh man.
Maybe Lincoln and Michael can meet up in the MCU at some point. That'd be awesome.
I know, dude.
But not after season 3. If you're watching Prison Break and you have got to season 3, you can watch season 3, but then just stop watching after that. It'll ruin the entire show. But the first 2 seasons, amazing.
Just stop before the last 5 minutes of season 2, and basically.
That's actually a better point. Yes.
Yeah.
Prison Break, great show. Yeah, huge spoilers, by the way. Whatever. But
spoilers for Prison Break. Yeah.
Also entirely irrelevant to Loki. But Mobius also starts questioning Loki. He wants to kind of understand Loki because, as is revealed at the end of the episode, he's chasing a variant who he believes is a version of Loki. And he thinks by understanding this variant of Loki better, he'll be able to understand the one that he's trying to catch and then be able to foil that Loki's schemes. He basically asks Loki if he enjoys causing pain and suffering as they go through reels of him causing harm. Loki says he views himself as a liberator, and Mobius says, yeah, liberator of eyeballs maybe, as they show the scene from Avengers where he cuts out the guy's eye so they can steal the material needed to stabilize the portal. And Mobius kind of explains to Loki that your whole life, you've caused pain and suffering so that others can become the best versions of themselves. And as he's saying that to make his point, a shot of the Avengers famous team-up shot from the original movie is playing, clearly emphasizing that, without Loki, the Avengers never would have been brought together and, been allowed to achieve their full team strength, essentially. But as they're going through this, there's kind of a knock at the door, basically, and one of the Minutemen, a lady, I think She doesn't have a name, but she has like a officer number. I think it's B-15, same one that brought Loki in earlier. Um, is talking to Mobius, and she's like, "This is a terrible idea. Uh, you can't be talking to this guy. We have to reset him immediately." And he's like, "No, I'm getting good information here. Like, this is important to my work. I'm doing my job, and you need to let me do it." Um, and while they're kind of talking outside, Loki escapes from the time theater. Um, he finds himself kind of trailing like a a desk worker. It seems like a normal like office stiff. He's trailing him as he brings like a cart of materials back to his desk, and kind of threatens him. He's like, "Listen, if you don't give me that tesseract so I can get out of here, like I'll straight up murder you." He said, "I'll gut you like a fish." And hilariously, the guy's like, "What's a fish? I need to know what I'm being threatened with before I comply."
That makes no sense to me. They have access to all the records and information of all time.
No, the best line in the episode, and he's like, Loki goes, "How do you not know what a fish is?" And the guy says, "Well, I lived my entire life behind a desk." I was dying at that line. Either way, it's funny. He doesn't know what a fish is, but he just essentially hands Loki the tesseract, and Loki's like, "Awesome, let me get out of here." And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, we actually got a bunch of these," and he opens up a drawer to reveal a dozen Infinity Stones, varying ones, mostly time and reality, a couple Soul Stones, a few Power and Space Stones, and a Mind Stone or two. But they're just sitting in a drawer collecting dust. And Loki, as he looks at it, you can kind of pinpoint the moment that he's like, "Oh no." Like that's when it kind of hits him that everything that he's experiencing is real and not just an illusion. We've had 20 plus movies building up to this point in the MCU. And all of them have been involved in the Infinity Saga to some degree. Obviously, the first Iron Man, I'm sure they didn't have the Infinity Stones all planned out and everything, but obviously that leads into, the sequels and Infinity War and all that. But basically, those movies have had the Infinity Stones in one way or another as the centerpiece of kind of the crux of power in the entire universe. The most powerful objects. It takes beings of insane strength to even hold one. And at the same time, this random guy working behind a desk for the TVA has about 15 of them in his junk drawer collecting dust. And he mentions that, some of the other guys use them as paperweights. And that was a huge shock to me. I don't know about you, Justin, but to me and to Loki, as, we basically see the most powerful things that we've known up to this point be, again, relegated to weighing down papers. And that was a big moment for the MCU, I think, in terms of shifting phases. After Endgame, it was kind of hard to imagine where the MCU could go in terms of upping, the stakes. Having a massive battle where basically every hero that has appeared on the screen up until that point is taking part in, against the ultimate bad guy with the ultimate source of power in the universe at stake. Like, that's pretty much as high stakes as we can get at this point. And, with the Infinity Stones basically controlling the universe, I was curious as to how the stakes were going to be raised further for the next phases, or if they were just going to simply be changed, if they were going to be a new Infinity Stone type MacGuffin to go after. But this scene really iterates that Marvel's like, "Listen, we did the Infinity Saga. The Infinity Stones were important then, but we're moving on. Like, we're going to tell a different story with, different elements in play. Like, you're not going to have to be like, oh, why didn't they just get the Time Stone and fix everything?" Like, this is indicating that things are about to get insane. Like, the whole thing that we were after, these stones that we were after for 20 movies, they don't matter anymore. Like, completely insignificant, in the grand scheme of things. And again, you can just kind of pinpoint Loki breaking mentally as he realizes that everything is real around him. And my jaw was on the floor at seeing all these Infinity Stones just tucked away in a drawer. I don't know if you had the same reaction, but I was shocked.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Like, if all these Infinity Stones are showing up there, I don't know, things that end up in the TVA must have come from the timeline. And if they're coming from the timeline, like, do they no longer exist in the timeline because they get removed from it to then be in the TVA? Or when they do the reset charges, does that just make a new one if one does get removed somehow? I don't know. Like, I don't know how there's all of these ones. I guess if there's multiple branching pathways or something, then if you remove it on one that's not the main timeline, then that could work. But there are some parts of it that I don't know if they explained or they're going to explain. But I guess they don't have to explain everything. We just gotta take it and see. But yeah, I mean, we knew that it was gonna, um, or we knew that the scope of the MCU was gonna blow up, coming soon because, I mean, the Eternals are coming out soon and they're gonna be on a total power level that's just way beyond anything we've ever seen before. And so we knew that the MCU was going in this direction, which is, I don't know, it's like it's going to be hard to watch Black Widow after this, because it's like, oh, everything that happens is basically predetermined, is what we're being told now. And even if that ends up not being the case, like, there's just powers out there that are so beyond anything that any of the heroes are even aware of. And Black Widow's going to be there punching somebody and shooting somebody else. It's like, she's great. But just going to a normal human after the insanity that is, like, the TVA, just having all these extra Infinity Stones is like, it seems kind of goofy. Obviously I'm still excited for it. I'm going to watch it, and I don't think this will really take away anything from that. It's just, when you stop and think about it, it's like, does anything that happens there even matter, like, on Earth? I don't know. I don't know, but it was really crazy seeing all those Infinity Stones right there. And I'm curious as to how many of them are from past Lokis, because we've been told that Loki's been caught a lot of times by the TVA. So I wonder how many times was him running away with an Infinity Stone or something, or if Captain America, when he went back in time, he accidentally activated something and he ended up there or something. Probably not, but
Yeah, again, time travel, when it's introduced, always raises more questions than it answers, even if it helps solve a problem. Obviously the Avengers needed to use it to undo the snap, or to do their own snap, I guess. And that just opened up an entire can of worms. I'm willing to suspend a reasonable amount of disbelief here, as long as there are not huge, glaring plot holes that are completely unanswered and unacknowledged. If they can do a little bit of hand wavy stuff, it's not going to bother me too much. I'll take time travel with all the grains of salt that I need to, but time travel is a huge can of worms.
Yeah, I mean, plot holes are just a part of time travel. Like, you can't have time travel without having plot holes. Um, and so that's kind of how it has to be. So if we nitpick at every single one, we're never gonna be able to just watch and enjoy, because, I mean, I had already thought of like 10 different plot holes that this show has made already, and that's just not a fun way to watch. So I'm trying to not be too nitpicky on that and just enjoy it, and and see where things lead with it. So I will say, you say her number was B-15, the lady who's the agent that captured Loki.
Yes, B-15.
B-15. I cannot stand her. She is like the only character in the show that I just straight up cannot stand. She's so unnecessarily rude and, like, constantly just fighting Loki. And, like, I know Loki's a bad guy at this point. Like, he hasn't gone through the redemption and whatever that he does. But, like, she is just constantly not even being like a total jerk to him, but also to Mobius. Like we see in episode 2 it's happening and stuff, but Mobius is here trying to do his best, and it's the classic like the rogue detective who wants to do their own work, and um, the everyone else is telling them, oh, you're not supposed to do that, and they're like, I promise it's gonna work, just give me one more chance, and then it ends up working, of course. The classic kind of trope there, and she's the one that's constantly just dunking on his ideas and being super passive aggressive or just straight up aggressive, and I'm just like, man, this lady needs to just chill and leave it alone. Like, I cannot stand when she's on screen. Yeah,
Yeah, she's a hard-nosed time cop for sure. She's doing her job to the best of her ability, but her job is being a hard ass. So, I mean,
I know, I cannot stand that. I just want her off the screen as much as possible.
well, I guess we'll see what happens with
uh,
B-15. Maybe she and Loki will have some sort
yeah,
of mutual respect by the end, or if one of
it's
them ends up
possible.
dying, we'll see. I don't know. Basically,
Yeah.
Loki, after seeing these Infinity Stones, Loki, after mentally breaking after seeing these stones be completely useless here, actually voluntarily goes back to the time theater. And then he watches the rest of his kind of life unfold and he watches his own death at the hands of Thanos in the beginning of Infinity War. And you can tell in Tom Hiddleston's eyes, fantastic acting by Tom Hiddleston in this series as well. It's just spectacular. Uh, you can tell just by his eye motion, by his eye movements and acting that he does in his face, that he's watching the scene with Thanos and he's like, okay, how do I get out of this one? He's like, I'm a little curious, but the moment that his neck is snapped, he's like in complete shock. His jaw drops and he's taken aback and he starts crying, or not bawling his eyes out, but his eyes well up, and he realizes that all his talk of being burdened with glorious purpose, that he just dies in the end like everybody else without having achieved his goal. And Mobius kind of comes back to find him just sitting despondently in a corner, and Loki kind of starts opening up to Mobius. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
listen, I don't enjoy being cruel to people and causing harm and stuff, but here he repeats actually the line that he mentioned earlier. He said, look, it's the cruel, elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear. He's like, I'm the weak one, and I need people to fear me, so I cause them pain and suffering, so they do. Which is like a very deep and self-reflective moment for this version of Loki to have. Basically, he got all of his character development of 3 movies in, a 30-second scene of him watching it all unfold, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of just breaks down after that, really. Mobius after that is like, look, I'm great. You know yourself. That's fantastic, because we're going to need that. Because the variant that I'm tracking is you.
Mm-hmm.
I need your help to track down a rogue version of yourself that has been killing,
Mm-hmm.
our Minutemen at various places in time. And who better to help catch a Loki than a Loki? And that's where episode 1 ends. And I mean, I was speechless almost after the first episode. I couldn't understand really what was going on. There was so much new information thrown at us in the pilot that
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't handle it all at once. I had to watch the episode a second time to really kind of grasp what was happening, and the impact that everything could be shaken up as we know it here in the universe. Wow, what a premiere!
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and a lot of people were talking about that last scene, um, where we find out that the variant is Loki. I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, oh, it's probably someone just impersonating Loki, or they just assume it's him. But that was just a guess after the first episode, and yeah, then there's that last scene where the agents show up in, the middle of somewhere and on some mission in the past, and then the hooded figure comes and lights them all on fire, basically. And it's like, man, this is brutal. This is not even just someone that's, has a plan, and the agents keep getting in his way, and so he's, taking them out. It's like, nah, this dude is just straight up, like, setting traps just to kill these Minutemen. And so, I'm sure there's an ulterior motive there as well, not just straight up murder for murder's sake. But it was tough, and a lot of people were talking about that. So it was it was pretty wild. And backtracking a little bit to Loki seeing kind of the end of his line there, I think there was a little bit more to it as well, not just the fact that he saw, okay, I eventually die without having everything I think that I'm gonna have. That Loki like knew Thanos, right? In by the time Avengers is happening, that's how he got the Mind Stone, and his scepter was from Thanos, right? And so he might not have met him face to face, but he definitely knew Thanos and knew of Thanos. And so I guess the fact, maybe I'm reading into it a little bit, but just him seeing that he dies at the hands of Thanos, trying to kill Thanos, maybe he realizes, like, hey, I have this good person in me, and it ends up coming out at the end of my life, and that ends up being more important to me than all these dreams of grandeur, because I end up being willing to sacrifice myself, taking out this guy that I had been working for, or trying to at least. I like to think that was part of what helped his character development in that moment, because I think just seeing that he doesn't accomplish anything just by itself wouldn't necessarily give him that instantaneous change. So I think it was a bit more than that, but that might be reading too much into it as well.
No, I think you're reading the perfect amount into it. I mean, this Loki, again, is not the one that we've seen actually experience everything. So for him to see everything that, he goes through in the future, to basically go by in like the blink of an eye, or, a few minutes essentially, but, compared to the years that take place after, it is a blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he essentially just gets all that character development instantly, which is a lot.
They do say time works differently in the TVA, so it's possible that even though he was only watching for a brief period of time, that it absorbed longer, or something like that. But we don't quite know. It's just funny how this is 2012 Loki, but Tom Hiddleston somehow aged 9 years between him taking the space stone and disappearing, and then suddenly he looks much older. Obviously he doesn't look old or anything, but you can tell he's significantly, almost a decade older. Just the inevitability of having an actor age and then play a character that's younger.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if we could, take these guys out of time and then just, have them act in the exact age and state that we need them to for the story. But unfortunately, real life.
Or they should have just filmed this way back then.
Well, I guess not unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, it's not the MCU. I mean, I wouldn't want to get snapped away for 5 years, or have to live through a snap for 5 years. So, or have a city dropped on my head, or be in New York during the first Avengers. So.
Ever.
Yeah, probably. Well, that's true. Every bad thing in any superhero movie basically ruins New York. So, always a bad place to live if there are superheroes about. But that is the end of the first episode. So lots to discuss there. But we can jump right into episode 2, because we are doing the double parter today. Next week, I'm sure we'll be back on the one episode per pod shtick. But In episode 2, it actually starts kind of right where the previous one left off, with an awesome musical number here, actually. We have Bonnie Tyler's I Need a Hero played as the variant version of Loki. And I'm just going to call the main character Loki that we're following Loki, and I'm going to call the Loki that they're hunting the variant, just to keep it a little bit less confusing. So the variant is taking out another squad of Minutemen, this time in a Renaissance fair in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1985. It is funny kind of just to see the Minutemen show up at random places in history or the future and look completely out of place in their like basically SWAT team gear. You know, their futuristic SWAT team gear does not exactly blend in a Renaissance fair in Wisconsin in 1985. But for them, it doesn't matter because they're just going to reset everything anyways. They actually get trapped by the variant, and the whole squad gets taken out except for the team's leader, Agent C-20. And C-20 is actually taken like prisoner. She's kidnapped by the variant. We see what the variant has been up to. It was shown in the last episode, but it's expanded a little bit more here. The variant grabs a reset charge on their way kind of out the door. The reset charges are what the TVA used to reset the timeline to the sacred timeline, basically disintegrating everything and everyone that was a result of, you know, the decision or action that was not supposed to happen. So the variant has been collecting reset charges as they take out Minutemen squads. For what purpose, we don't know yet. But we get back to the TVA and Loki, and he's no longer in like a prisoner's jumpsuit, but he's got some very dress casual shirt and tie and khakis, which is kind of funny to see the god of mischief dressed like a everyday white collar worker is pretty funny. But basically he's getting orientation from Miss Minutes, who's the kind of animated clock that gave the PSA in the first episode about the TVA while he was waiting in line. But Loki's not paying attention. He's kind of just annoyed by Miss Minutes, this kind of animated hologram in front of him, and he's flipping through a jet ski magazine at Mobius's desk while he's kind of getting oriented here. And as he's waiting, Mobius shows up to take Loki away because they got work to do. Basically, Mobius is on his way to find out what happened in Wisconsin, and he brings Loki along as they both are aware that they're hunting a Loki. Mobius isn't really worried about Loki escaping because he explains to Loki, he's like, look, you already know that we can catch you, and how is betraying us going to get you closer to the timekeepers? There's been a couple lines here and there about how Loki is trying to actually meet directly face-to-face with the, as he calls them, space lizards, who are the ones behind the scenes of the TVA. But Mobius here is completely manipulating Loki. Like, he knows, that's what Loki's after, and he's like, look, if you don't help me, how do you expect to get that? But he's also not saying that, hey, I'll get you a meeting with the timekeepers. So he's kind of playing Loki here, trying to get him to do what he wants for the hope that he could meet up with them in the future. So they get kind of the briefing for their mission, and Loki gets a kind of trainee jacket that says Variant on the back, which I imagine is probably going to be a very popular Halloween costume. It'd be a very easy costume to just put Variant in orange letters on the back of a brown windbreaker. So expect to see lots of Lokis this Halloween. But the Minutemen squad shows up in Wisconsin. And Loki actually asked an important question, which I think a lot of people had. Why don't they just go back in time, before the branch reality was created, or the branch in the timeline was created? And Mobius answers, because Nexus events destabilize the time flow, which means you can only enter the timeline in real time there instead of at whatever point you want, which seems a little contrived, but also if they could just go back to right before the incident happened every time, there would be literally no problems. Like they could just, if they kept sending Minutemen squads that kept getting attacked, they could just send another squad 2 seconds before to back them up. So I'm glad that they have a reason for that not to happen, because otherwise I'd be wondering the same exact thing that Loki was.
Yeah, they seem to be kind of making up rules as they go along for the show, which, they kind of have to. So it's an interesting story. If they always could just go back and fix things, then there would be not a whole lot of interesting storytelling. Um, Although I guess, bad things could still happen if they were like meant to or whatever. But any ones they wanted to stop um, would not. But it's really interesting because like, um, is the TVA a part of the timeline? Like, is them jumping in time to places part of the big timeline? Or are they coming from outside of the timeline as well? Um, and that's something that's a little bit interesting to me because, uh, like, they're experiencing things on the timeline, obviously, and they are in some sense of time when they're at the TVA, right? I mean, they're when they walk, when they pick things up, like that has to happen through time, and even if they experience time differently, there still is time, and so like, are they on a different timeline or is it all the same timeline? And they're just jumping around in it, and they're at a specific point in it that's kind of like a home base. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I also don't think it's very relevant. But just the fact that they can jump in all the time is like, hmm. Because if they're not a part of it, then there must be some type of branch reality that's still connected that they can jump over to. But yeah, again, they seem to be kind of making up rules as they go, so this is probably all just overthinking and wondering. But um, that was something that was on my mind as I was watching. I was like, huh.
Yeah, I feel like with something as kind of abstract as the TVA, you kind of have to make up the rules as you go, which I'm glad that they are doing, but also kind of laying out the groundwork for the rules that they're creating. Like they're very clearly stating that they can't go back in time. If they just didn't, we'd probably assume that they couldn't, otherwise they would. But making it clear, I think, is nice. I do think they may be in danger of kind of over explaining some things. If you try to explain every single detail about the TVA, it naturally just doesn't make sense how it could exist. And so I think trying to explain every single minute detail may get too convoluted. So I admire that they're showing a little restraint with every detail. I'm sure the more important things are still yet to be revealed, but kind of drip feeding us the information about the TVA is definitely keeping me on my toes here.
Yeah, yeah, and they've already had quite a few just like exposition dumps, which is necessary. I mean, when there's this whole new entity and we have no clue anything about the timekeepers or things like that, like the TVA coming into this show, like there is kind of a need for them to just dump information on us, and just to even know what it is. And so having more just to explain some of these small things, you're right, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I'm glad that that's not happening. I like speculating and questioning things like that because I'm like, huh, that's interesting. What is, but again, like I said before, nitpicking is something I'm trying not to do because you'll always find some kind of hole, and that just kind of ruins the enjoyment of just watching something for what it is. So, um, yeah. But sorry, this has all been a wild tangent. I totally lost track of where in the actual story we were.
Yes, so fortunately I have been keeping track. So
Nice.
basically, this is coming back to Loki explaining or asking and getting explained to why uh, they can't just go back before the event took place. They have to enter the time flow in real time after a Nexus event. Um, There's also another bit of exposition here as he gets kind of quizzed on a reset charge by one of the other Minutemen. Basically, it says that the reset charges prune the affected radius of a branch timeline, allowing time to heal all its wounds. And Loki goes on to say that kind of sounds like a nice way of saying disintegrating everything in its vicinity, which, as we've seen, that's exactly what it does.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it also make things as well? Like if something went missing from that spot, would it create a new of that thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have no idea.
Well? Like if someone eats a burrito that they weren't supposed to, right? They would probably disintegrate the person back to where they were, but would it also like make a new burrito? Like the fact that meaning specifically like Loki takes the time stone with him, meaning it's no longer there. But if he was not supposed to take the time stone, like do they make a new Loki and a new time stone back there, or do they just disintegrate the one that left, thus leaving the timeline with no Loki and no time stone? Right? So the time resets must also like put things back where they were in addition to that, because otherwise how the heck would there be so many Infinity Stones in like the drawer, right? There must be new ones created by those things in one sense.
Yeah, I guess you're right that they would have to have a duplicate or at least confiscate the false, like the created one from the wrong decision. Maybe that's a duplicate. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many questions that are raised here, but I think it's safe to say that the TVA is not concerned about who's eating burritos. But I could be proven wrong. Maybe there'll be, maybe Hulk was supposed to give Ant-Man more tacos in Endgame.
That's true.
And he only gave him 2. But, yeah, I like the description here of, allowing time to heal its wounds. It kind of personifies time. At least it gives it the identity of kind of being a living, being. That time isn't just, how we experience events, forwards, but like it actually is a living thing that holds the universe together, which I think is an interesting viewpoint, and I think will be explored more here as we learn more about the sacred timeline and the timekeepers and just time, I guess. So as they're exploring the crime scene here in Wisconsin, Loki kind of takes the opportunity to be Loki. He starts monologuing about what he would do if he were this variant Loki, which he's basically just using as a stalling tactic. It's clear that he's trying to maybe help out the other Loki and get them to work together to take down the TVA. And so he's thinking if the other Loki has the same thought, then they could, have set a trap together and they'd be able to take out Mobius and the Minutemen squad and he can escape here. But Mobius sees through it and realizes that Loki's lying, stalling for time, and they head out of there. Mobius then has a meeting with the judge from the prior episode, and I don't think we mentioned her name earlier, but it's Judge Ravonna.
Judge
Ravonna
Judy.
Renslayer, which
I'm just gonna call her
sick
Judge
name,
Judy.
by the way. We can call her Judge Judy, even though that's not remotely her name.
She's a judge. She looks like a Judy.
I guess she does. So Judge Judy is kind of like the boss of the TVA, essentially. She answers to the timekeepers, but is kind of running things for them in the TVA. And Mobius is like, listen, this Loki that we have is my key to understanding the variant. And she disagrees with him. They have a little back and forth. But basically, he convinces her to give him one more shot with this Loki, and she grants it. So following this meeting with Judge Judy, Mobius and Loki start doing some research where and when exactly they might find the variant. And Loki's reading through some case files and gets inspired by reading about Ragnarok. Basically, his theory is that the variant is hiding in moments in time right before apocalyptic events. The thought process being, you can do whatever you want, even if it's not supposed to happen, right before an apocalyptic event, because everybody and everything in that vicinity is going to be wiped from existence shortly anyways. Um, if I'm choosing a red shirt or a blue shirt, but an asteroid's going to hit my house in 5 seconds regardless, what shirt I choose does not make a difference. And so that's how Loki figures out what the variant's doing to hide from the TVA. So they have to, of course, test this theory, which, is clearly not a something that the TVA had considered beforehand. Otherwise, Loki wouldn't have been the one to figure it out. And Mobius points out this is a pretty glaring hole in their security if Loki's right. But to test this theory, they traveled to Pompeii in 79 AD, right before Vesuvius erupts. And Loki just makes a scene. He starts speaking Latin to the people around. He's like, listen, I'm from the future, and the volcano's about to erupt, and we're all going to die. And it doesn't matter what I say because we're all going to die anyways. So, la 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 la. He lets a bunch of goats loose, starts just talking gibberish, throwing stuff all around, and he's like, enjoy your last moments on Earth, people. It's been fun. And I thought that scene was hilarious, but he's proven right when Mobius uses his little detector and he just detects no variance or no variant activity, I think is what he says. But basically, Loki is proven right that the variant is hiding in apocalyptic, or right before apocalyptic events, to hide himself from the TVA. They're not going to be able to pick up on that variant energy signature if there's no variant energy detected right before everything gets wiped. So the next step is Mobius actually uses the gum that he was given by the child in the previous episode, and they kind of cross-reference when and where this gum was, sold and apocalyptic events. Basically, they kind of pinpoint this massive hurricane that hits a superstore in Alabama in the year 2050. So they send another Minuteman squad in there.
Yeah, I wonder how many memes there are going to be in 2050 about...
yeah, it's going to be like Back to the
Alabama.
Future. I'm sure people are going to remember this this show and this exact scene in 30 years. But
just the entirety of Alabama, too.
Yeah, apparently this hurricane was a Category 8, which doesn't even exist
statewide.
And I don't think would even have a reason to exist in the future, even if this is pointing towards climate change making storms worse here. I don't know if that's what Marvel's trying to say, but Category 8 just basically being an absurd level hurricane. It's about to wipe out, this store in Alabama and everything around it. So the Minuteman squad heads in with Mobius and Loki. Loki heads off with kind of the captain, B-15, and while they are, kind of scoping out the place, the variant kind of catches B-15 off guard and possesses her body. She ends up talking to Loki through B-15's body, kind of revealing, not necessarily revealing their plan, but kind of just having a chat and figuring out what each other wants. Obviously they're both Loki and they're trying to feel each other out, and they know the thought process of the other. So it's a very interesting verbal game of cat and mouse. But it is clear that the main Loki that we're following here, is an inferior version to this other Loki. Mobius even says it as much earlier in the episode. And this Loki takes it personally that, anybody, even a version of himself, could be better than himself, which, again, just goes to show the level of arrogance that he has and, self-absorption. But this other Loki is just talking circles, or the variant is talking circles around Loki, and he has no clue what's going on. He's trying to figure it out and clearly indicating that he's not on the level of this other Loki. Because if he were, he'd be able to figure out what's going on and who it is. As they move around the store, kind of talking, the variant possesses different bodies and shifts from verbally sparring with him as he's, B-15, to possessing this kind of massive dude, and they have a fist fight. Loki's kind of knocked out of it for a sec by this other variant possessed person. And we cut away from that to Mobius and the rest of the team and they find C-20, the leader of the previous squad, who was kidnapped in Wisconsin. And she is just coming out of being possessed, similar to how the B-15 captain was just possessed earlier. And she's just kind of muttering under her breath. She's like, it's real, it's real, it's real. And we don't get any information on that, but she does say to Mobius, she's like, look, I gave it up. I gave up where the timekeepers are and how to get to them. So we can figure that the variant Loki's plan obviously has something to do with the timekeepers and potentially destroying them, it seems like. But I thought this whole sequence in this superstore preparing for a hurricane was excellent. I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, that whole scene was great. It was very, like, I don't know, it was kind of supposed to be creepy. It was kind of supposed to be creepy, it seemed, with the lights flickering and, you know, the whole storm atmosphere and all the, you know, lights were down, and I just said that. But, you know, it was kind of creepy inside, and then with the Loki, or the variant, obviously controlling the minds of the people, pretty eerie. Not like the scariest thing, but really well done, just to unnerve Loki and to unnerve us. Like, who the heck is doing this? Obviously, we know that, or we've been told that it's a Loki variant, and he has the ability to do things like this. It's almost as if it's like Wanda's abilities in Age of Ultron, where she's given all the nightmares to people, although obviously she's not straight up mind controlling people then, but having the glow in the eyes and infiltrating people's minds. And we haven't seen Loki really do that up until now. So I wonder, you know, if it is a variant of Loki, does it have additional powers that he doesn't have? Or is this just something that Loki has never used before? I was a little bit interested in that. And then, yeah, I'm really curious as to what the Minuteman, you know, C-20 said about where the timekeepers are, because I think a lot of people watching are skeptical that they even exist. I think they exist. I think they're just not necessarily the all-powerful beings that they're hyped up to be. And so I'm curious as to how soon this means we're going to actually interact with and see the, you know, these timekeepers. You know, I'm assuming that that's kind of in there because the variant's next location is to the timekeepers where they are, or maybe not the very next location that they go, but pretty soon here we're going to get revealed what the heck the timekeepers are or who they are. And, you know, clearly the fact that the variant was asking about where they were means that they probably have a similar goal as to the Loki, you know, that's the main character. You know, given that he's been asking about meeting the timekeepers and wanting to do that, and, you know, wanting or claiming to want to help the other one to meet and overthrow the timekeepers as well. So it seems like they have similar goals, although the other one doesn't want to, or the variant doesn't want to really share in the fun, because, you know, turned down Loki's offer. So it's interesting. I'm also a little bit, I don't know how, you know, this random Minuteman agent, I mean, clearly she was of some rank, but I'm curious as to how she would even know where the timekeepers were, because Mobius doesn't seem to have any idea. He just knows that they're out there, and maybe it's just because he hasn't mentioned it or anything, but, you know, having not met them, and he seems of higher rank than C-20, which maybe that's not the case, but I'm just like, how does this one person know where they are? if they seem mostly inaccessible even to people that are working for them most of the time. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see what happens, and I'm wondering if this means, again, that next episode, or at least the episode after, we'll actually get to see and know the truth about the timekeepers. I don't know. I guess we'll have to just watch and find out. The show just keeps you looking for the next fix.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you there that there's plenty more to the timekeepers that we are yet to find out. But I also have to agree with you that they're definitely not all as they seem or all that we've been told that they are to this point. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I'm getting major Wizard of Oz kind of vibes from the timekeepers. Everybody's saying how they're the most powerful beings in the universe. They control the flow of time. But apparently nobody's ever met them, and when they are asked to be met with, they're always too busy. And so it seems like there's a man behind the curtain, or the timekeepers behind the curtain. And there's either a deeper, darker secret that we're not aware of yet, or it's a big facade. And we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But after Mobius meets up with C-20 and, the rest of the Minuteman squad, we get back to Loki and the Variant kind of fighting, and he's like, listen, like, what do you want with me? And the Variant kind of turns to him and is like, listen, like, you're so arrogant. He's just like putting this Prime Loki in his place. He's like, this isn't about you. Loki's like, listen, we can team up and we can rule the TVA. We can conquer them. And the Variant's like, I have no interest in ruling the TVA. Mm-hmm. They don't elaborate, but I think it's pretty clear that you can read between the lines that they're trying to destroy the TVA or the Timekeepers or something like that along those lines. And then it's revealed, this Variant. We finally see who it is, and it's a lady Loki. It's a female version of Loki. As stated before, the Variants can be like literally any version of you that exists across the multiverse, and this is a female version. So she's got the similar look with the horned crown. It's a little bit less garish, but she's still got the green and gold color scheme going on. And as the Minutemen are closing in on them, she drops. They show this crazy overhead shot of the store where lights are just blinking all over the place. And, we realize there are hundreds of reset charges here. And Lady Loki opens up 100 time doors and just drops all these charges into various places throughout time. Now there's, we see a screen flashing different branches that have suddenly appeared back at the TVA, but it went a little bit too quickly for me to catch any. I'm sure somebody online has taken a HD screenshot to kind of pinpoint where those are happening, and I'm sure that they'll come back up again here in the next episode. But essentially, Lady Loki drops 100, reset charges at various places in the main timeline, which just causes utter chaos. And she gets out of there. She opens the time door for herself and leaves. And she does leave it open for a bit. Mm-hmm. So she allows Loki to kind of make up his mind, and he sees the Minutemen closing in, and classic Loki, he dips right out through that door following Lady Loki. Now, is it a surprise to see him, abandon the TVA like that? Absolutely not. You can probably just be like, look, I was trying to follow her and gain information. Like, that's a completely plausible, in his mind, a completely plausible reason. But
they had him stand there. They had him stand there looking for a second like, oh no, I'm conflicted. What am I supposed to do? As if anybody of us here in the audience had any doubts that dude was sprinting straight through that door. Like,
there's no way that any of us thought that he was going to stick around with the TVA. And I'm excited to see some Loki v. Loki action next week as they, verbally spar with each other again. He loves to talk, and I'm sure this version of himself does too. Does love to talk as well. So maybe we'll learn more about Lady Loki's big plot next week, and we'll figure out what Loki's play in that plot is. If he's going to help, or if he's going to work with the TVA to bring this rogue Loki in. There again, I feel like I've said it 100 times throughout this recording here, but there are many questions unanswered, and with only 2 episodes in, of course, you don't want everything given away immediately, but just repeating it to say there's so many things I need answered, and just too many days in between episodes for me, basically. So this show has me hook, line, and sinker. Like I'm 100% in on this. I was gonna watch it even if it were just fine, but this show is killing it in production, in acting quality, in the music choices, and in terms of the story so far. It's been very interesting, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, this show is absolutely a hit, and I think this is one that's just going to be made better with time.
Haha.
Oh, that was not intentional, but I think it will just be made better as the MCU progresses, and we see more of the results of how this plays out into the rest of the MCU, and I think we'll just grow to appreciate it more with seeing everything that comes after, with multiverse and more time travel related things and all of those things. So I'm really interested to see what happens because, I was going to say it seems like there's no big bad. I suppose the Lady Loki is the main antagonist at this point. But I'm not even very confident of that she's going to end up being like the main antagonist. So I don't know if it's going to be like the Timekeepers or something else, or her, I guess. But it seems like this is prime for Disney to pull a red herring and flip something around on us in one way or another. So, that's why we keep watching, and it's going to be exciting, and I cannot wait for the next episode. And for some reason I had this in my mind when they go through the portal, the variant and Loki. I'm just imagining like they go to this land where all of the Loki variants that have escaped, are meeting together. Like it's like some council of bricks, except it's all the Lokis that are all hanging out, and he's like the C-237 or whatever, the most Loki. And then there's all the other ones. And I don't know. But that was what popped in my head. And, shout out Rick and Morty.
Shout out Rick and Morty. New season premiering on Sunday. I'm very much looking forward to that as well.
That's like this weekend.
Yeah, 2 more days. And
I was going to say, that's coming up.
Season 5 will be dropping. There's actually a ton of stuff coming out this summer. We got a new season of Dave already premiered. We got Rick and Morty coming out. We have Marvel shows. We got Marvel movies coming out. New season of Archer's on the way at the end of the summer. 9. There's so much excellent content that I'm looking forward to.
Man.
And just, again, it feels like I'm being a little greedy after, a full year plus of having absolutely nothing. But I just want this entire season all at once. Man. Like, I want to watch the whole thing. I am appreciating the week-to-week episodic nature of all these shows, as they clearly keep us, hooked, and the suspense between episodes really drives speculation and fan theories and just general discussion about the show that binging it all in one day really couldn't give you. But it's just showing that it's working, because I'm begging for more. I need it right into my veins.
We just need Netflix to buy out the MCU, because Netflix drops them all same day.
Right, Netflix has more money than Disney. I forgot about that.
And then, can you imagine Netflix original MCU
Oh, it
content?
would be so bad. Oh my
I guess
gosh.
they did. They kind of did. I mean, like Iron Fist and Daredevil and Jessica Jones,
Marvel
which I
gave
don't know if those are
Netflix the
technically
go-ahead to
MCU,
produce their shows, but they didn't actually
but
help. If Marvel
uh,
Studios produce stuff for Netflix, it'd be great. If Netflix is producing stuff that just has the Marvel logo on it, they're good seasons of Daredevil and
Daredevil was
Punisher
excellent,
for
man.
sure, but without it being
Yeah,
connected to the main MCU, it seemed empty. And
yeah,
those characters, as far as we know, are not coming back to join the MCU at any point,
yeah.
unless I'm
Well, I'm
wrong about that.
curious if there's a yeah, I'm curious if there's an avenue for that to happen with some sort of a multiverse opening up, even just for a cameo or something. Um, I don't want to speculate too much, and it's obviously not a big deal.
Hmm.
But if they're bringing in non-MCU Spider-Man, like why the heck not non-MCU characters that are still Marvel?
Yeah, we could absolutely see it happen. I'm
Um,
not willing to write it off 100%
yeah,
just yet, but I
yeah,
have not heard anything about that. Uh,
yeah.
so we'll see.
Well, we'll see.
As with all
We'll
of our
see.
episodes, I
It's
feel like
fun to
we're ending with
speculate.
"we'll see" next week. But that's the problem when
Yeah,
you cover the MCU is that they're always building for the future and everything's connected. So they're not going to reveal everything right away, but you got to kind of take it as it comes, and they keep you waiting for the next week. They do a good job with the cliffhangers
mhm,
and stuff. So um, you got episode 3 coming up this week, and I can't wait for that. And we'll be halfway through the season already. Jeez.
oh no. Seeing all this time travel stuff just makes me that much more excited for Kang too.
Mm.
Like, man, I don't know if he's gonna get introduced soon or if he's only gonna get introduced in Quantumania, um, or if he'll just be a one-off villain or a big-time. I've already said I hope he's not a one-off. Um, I hope he gets introduced before Quantumania, and then that's where he really like shines. But that he's a long-term Thanos kind of villain, even if he's not, a 3-phase type of guy. It's like, man, seeing all this time travel stuff, I'm just imagining what could be done with that, especially if the results, the consequences of or not today's, the consequences of episode 2, all of the branches going off, if that turns into multiverse type of deal, just the time travel craziness that can go on with somebody who's that powerful intentionally using it for evil purposes. Just like, man, I don't know. I don't want to look too far ahead, but it's getting me hyped for him. uh, but yeah. So a lot of we'll see, a lot of speculation. We're sure to be wrong on most of it. Um, but you know what? That's okay. The point is that it's fun to speculate, and the things we get right, we will focus on much more than the things we get wrong. And by this time next year, people will only remember the things that we got right. So
Exactly. No one will remember our
uh,
wrong predictions except for us, and even I will
exactly,
push those out of my memory. So, uh,
exactly. So let's go. It's gonna be episode 3 coming up here. And every day is one day closer to that, and one day closer to Black Widow. And we are hitting that time of year after May of no MCU content. Man, we're just hitting the ground running, and there's not going to be a whole lot of weeks left that we don't have a new episode or a new movie or something. And yeah, that's awesome. I don't really know what else to say.
yeah, very much looking forward to the upcoming slate. There's so much on the horizon that we're still very excited for, and as we've reiterated again and again on our previous episodes, it doesn't seem like there are any plans to slow down here. With breezing past the Infinity Stones, it seems like Marvel is ready to step up into the next phase. They revealed the 10 movie slate for Phase 10. Which doesn't even include all the shows that are going on at the same time. So so much content that's coming, and yeah, we're gonna be here covering it all. Just giving our opinions on everything and stuff like that. So yeah, that'll do it for the first couple episodes of Loki. But we'll be back for next week with episode 3, and tune in then.
Deuces.
Peace.